I want to thank you all for those comments, and definitely, as I stated previously, this item, no item that I proffer ever intends to impede or slow down anybody's due diligence. I totally encourage each and every one of us to do our own homework and our own due diligence so we can juxtapose what's presented to us with what we already know. That's why a lot of times when I present the items, I've done my own homework on it, so it's much more easier for me to articulate it. And what's left in this particular issue, which I do have some comments that I'll save for next week. I'm not going to discuss all of the commentary I have at this particular time, but there's been a lot of discourse around this issue that goes back to 2012. That's not really the reality of it. The disparity study started in 2012. I'll throw out a name for those of us who've been around. The name is Rose Bearfield Cox. Anybody knows her?
Yes.
Okay. She was over what was called Small Local Minority Business, SBM. That was a department. That was prior to a disparity study. And one of the issues that brought that particular department to bear, believe it or not, it's going to probably not you with Mr. Alonzo, your comments previously we talked about. There was a time, and I'll just leave it at that. There was a time that prior to 1996, the composition of this board did not look like the composition of this community. And when we went to single member districts, that's when we increased the number of seats that reflected the composition of this community. Hence, put it out and make it plain for those people in the back. There was a time on this board that there was one African American seat and one Hispanic seat. One African American and one Hispanic seat. So when you start to look at some of the issues relative to engaging from a business standpoint, that level of engagement paralleled those particular numbers. So it's not this versus that. It's about the representation, the equity of opportunity, and something that truly reflects in a very transparent, deliberate, intentional, and legal way efforts to be inclusive in this community. And as you mentioned, and I'll be quiet, Mr. Alonzo, it's not about what divides us, it's what unites us. And that's what we should be focused on. And I hope that as we continue this discourse and other discourses and other conversations, that stays at the fulcrum and at the forefront of what we do. So again, I thank you all for your comments. And are there any questions?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Dr. Bendros Mendengar. Yes, ma'am.
it's not a question, but a comment. When you're speaking of procurement, the GOB, and disparity study, and I have two in the office that I'm reviewing again, and opportunities to do business with Miami-Dade County Public Schools. And if you are interested, everyone is invited tomorrow night at 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. at Friendship Missionary Baptist Church, 740 Northwest 58th Street. We will have an in-depth discussion. It is important that we know the truth, we know the reality. When Dr. Gallen calls names, we know that it's been an uphill battle. Not new. And the sad part is that it's ongoing. So that's the invitation for everyone who's interested. I have flyers to share. So I'm not going to sit here and act as if I don't know what's happening, because I do. But it's fair for everyone to get the information at the same time from the same people. And that's what I have to say about that, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the time.
And thank you so much for your leadership and your commitment. And when Dr. Bendros Mendengar mentioned names, those of us who've been around, we don't just look at names, we look at years. Rose Bearfield Cox probably left here almost 25, 30 years ago, retired, and it was a single department around that effort. And again, it was about representing this community as a whole. There are no more questions on this particular item, H4. Any, okay, co-sponsors? Bob Santos? Okay, co-sponsors? Question?
Absolutely.
Yes, question, Madam Chair? Oh, co-sponsors, co-sponsors? Okay, move it.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Next item up Mr. Espino.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Board members, I bring this item up for purposes of clarifying a tool that we have at our disposal, aligning what I believe the Sunshine Law provides to our own board policy. I bring this item up disheartened, really, because as much as we talk about unity up here, I certainly did not have the benefit of feeling that unity recently and I tried to have a conversation about this yesterday with a much more limited audience, because essentially this is a internal housekeeping discussion for us, how we interact as a board, how we interact with each other. And I remember from the early ons of being appointed, the chair often told me about the collegiality of this board, and I was not the benefactor of that collegiality, unfortunately. When I called a sunshine meeting, and that's what it is, a sunshine meeting, with board member Alonso, the result of that was I was not shown that collegiality, and frankly, it resulted in race baiting and divisive tactics being deployed on me that, in my opinion, slandered my personal and professional reputation. I believe that I am the most regulated person on the dais, because as an elected official and an attorney, I have a series of ethical requirements I have to abide by, and I hold myself to the highest standards. And I've basically, since 2009, lived in the sunshine, whether on the city council of Miami Springs or in the various city attorney roles in the cities I represented. So I'd like to think I know my way around sunshine meetings. So in any case, I called a board conference with board member Alonso, and I asked a board conference just with him, specifically because, as he had stated, since discussing the strategic plan, he's been bringing up the disparity study. And so I, as somebody that, as a government lawyer, somebody who does procurement, as somebody that's has brought several procurement items up or contracting items up, said, I'm gonna jump into this. But before I do, I want to see if there's any common ground or get some information from board member Alonso. And that's the purpose of the meeting. It was exclusively to hear from him, because his position, I did not hear it as fleshed out as our chair's position during the last meeting, where she specifically said in that item that board member Baez-Geller brought, she wanted to evaluate women participation in the minority study. Her position was clear and was already in the works, so it was just to hear from him. So in that meeting, I handed it to your office. This is yesterday wasn't here. I handed it to your office the exhibit I used yesterday. I looked at our board policy, saw that we had the ability. I know under the Sunshine Law we had a policy 10.165 where a member can convene and invite, and pause for dramatic effect, like you say, board member Gallen, pause for dramatic effect, and invite members of the board, members of the administration, and the public to participate. And that's what I did. Our communication to Desiree specifically said we'd like to convene on this date, at this location, at this time, a meeting with board member Alonso. Thereafter, notices were sent out, which I believe to be inadequate. I'm not going to get into a legal argument with our attorney about their sufficiency, but it's important for the public to know who is meeting, when, where, about what. Because certainly, especially as a district as big as ours, if I decide to have a board member conference with board member Colucci about how schools in between that border our districts are affected by a feeder pattern or by buses, that's very different than a district-wide conversation. And so that notice went out, we just said the school board of it. I had my meeting, and Dr. Bendros Mendigal participated, and my immediate concern, you can ask her, she was there, my immediate concern was for her, because I convened the meeting, I know who was invited, and I just said, this was an event and a meeting for us to discuss board member Alonso's comments on the record so far. And at that time, there was an opportunity for our attorney to say, the board member convened it. You are certainly welcome to attend. It was open to anybody to attend as part of the Sunshine, but the participation was limited. And the lack of doing that created confusion. It created confusion. That confusion spurred a series of conversations that then occurred, unfortunately, without me being present on the board, which, in my opinion, slandered my character. Absolutely slandered my character. And without so much as me being able to put on the record any kind of indication of what my position was going to be on that, representations were made about why we should. I just want to tell you, Dorothy, that anybody would have walked in that room, I would have said the same thing, irrespective of any element of their person, because the meeting was with Robert. It wasn't because it was you, the color of your skin, the love of God. All right, I would have done something to the
May I
church.
be excused?
Yeah, I'm being respectful.
No.
I mean, I just want to say that I value your opinion.
No.
And so, bottom line is, the besmirching, I didn't appreciate, and I wanted to clear the air yesterday so we wouldn't do it today. And it generally hurt, because it's just never been an allegation that anyone's ever leveled against me. And so, to clarify the situation, I brought forward this agenda item, which specifically says, but one other thing is, I disagree with our board attorney who says there's a provision in our policy that says any member may participate in a district meeting, not board meeting, but district meeting or advisory meeting. District meeting, we are allowed to participate in district meeting. We would still have to comply with Sunshine Law. And so my item specifically provides for that any board conference would have to have specific notice that complies exactly with the Sunshine Law. The Sunshine Law calls for any 2 or more board members of a governing body to participate in a meeting. Inherent in that notice is not just time, place, location, and generally a representation of the board members, but actually who is participating. So develop a policy that specifically strengthens our Sunshine Law notice requirement to provide specific information, specifically not only the date and time, but which board members are invited to as active participants, whether staff will be invited, and whether public comments will be part of that meeting. And the reason that's all important is because there's also a misunderstanding of public participation. We have public meetings. And as you all know, the public needs to speak on any item before we take final dispositive action on it. That means somewhere in the decision-making process. But if I'm having a fact-finding mission, as I want to have with you, Dr. Gallant, on an item, if I want the public participation, I will convene a public forum to hear from them. And so these are the items that I think if we put all these things in a notice, the public will be very, very clear, in the sake of transparency and the Sunshine Law, what will be the subject of that meeting. I will tell you just one final note is when we do press releases, when we have invitations, those invitations, those press releases say with specificity who is invited to attend, who actually attended, and we're very quick to let everybody know the following members participated in this event when it's promotion. And yet when we have to sunshine a meeting, it could be as vague as 2 or more members of the board will be present. I find that to be deficient. I find that to be insufficient. And this will clarify that so that when we have a tool that's our disposal as policymakers, the public is aware of who's participating as active members, even if everybody can participate as just attendees. That's my item.
Thank you. Number one, I support the item, but I must be very, very candid. I don't support at all the representation that you've made regarding what transpired. I don't. Full stop. You suggested race baiting. You suggested some deliberate effort to besmirch your character. That was not the case. What I found to be the case is any effort to restrict access and participation of a duly elected board member in a conversation between 2, 3, or more elected officials is erroneous. The Sunshine Law you just stipulated, and it says very, very clearly at the state and local levels, and there's constitutional right of access. I spent a lot of time talking about the Constitution before I even got to the state and district policy. So my question is very, very clear. Is it your intent now? Was it your intent then? Or will it be your intent at any point to hold sunshine meetings that preclude any board member from attending or participating contrary to current Florida sunshine laws or district policy?
Mr. Chair, if I may respond, with due respect, I'm going to reject the premise of your question.
It's a yes or no question.
No. Sir,
It's a yes,
sir,
a no
sir,
question.
But hold your premise of your question.
You can't speculate on the premise. It's a direct question. Is it your intent to preclude a board member?
That's not your question.
You want me to restate it?
Sunshine Law.
I'll restate the question.
Dr. Gallen,
I'll let you. Do I have the floor? I let you speak.
you asked me a question.
And I want you, but you're not going to tell me ask my question so I can respond to you. You go.
No, restate your question. You said you were going to restate your question.
Is it your intent now at some point to hold sunshine meetings that preclude any board member from attending or participating contrary to current Florida sunshine laws and district policy? Yes or no? Is that your intent now?
No.
Okay,
Contrary
thank
to
you.
the law is
Thank
no.
you. Full stop. That's all I want to know.
Absolutely not.
Thank
Right.
you. That is not your intent. As I understand it, that was the impact. Moving forward, I just need to be clear. That's not your intent, because I don't want to be confronted with that intent, because the impact, if it happens, I will never be precluded from attending or participating in any meeting pursuant to Florida law until the legislature changes it. That's the operation that I'm going to take. Secondly, I'm not aware, I'm not privy to any race baiting, your words, full stop, that occurred at the prior meeting. I think that that's a misrepresentation of this board. Those who spoke were me, the chair, Board Member Santos, Board Member Alonzo, and Dr. Bendros Mendengal. At no point do I recollect anyone injecting any race baiting in that particular discourse. We can't take any ownership for the optics of what the people see, what the people say, or what the media prints. And parenthetically, I will say to you, and you know what I'm saying to you publicly, I'll say to you in private, as I have. If there are any issues I have, you know I will communicate with you directly regarding that. So I fully support the item. I reject the representation. And last but not least, I'm struggling with your continued representation of your role as an attorney. When you're here, you are an attorney, but you're not giving legal advice to the board. Or are you? Or are you? Because you know what your code of ethics stipulate. We have a board attorney that has combined over a century of years in this area. You have board attorneys that know medical, that know auto. I may have to call an attorney because a tree fell on my house, residential in Atlanta. So everybody has an area of specialty. So I am struggling with our board attorney's office repeatedly being questioned about things that are explicitly in the law. They are the board attorney. Yes, you are an attorney. I'm an educator, but we have a chief educational officer in this district, which is the superintendent. So I have some additional comments that I'll save for next week. I was prayerful that we would not have to go down this particular discussion. That's why I said at the onset, I fully support the item and plan on supporting it and co-sponsoring it. I'm going to strongly advocate for transparency, but I would never sit quietly or silently or complicitly in something that is patently false. Any effort, and you've clarified it for me for the record, that is not your intent, so we're good. Long as your intent now, last time, or in the future is never to preclude a board member, elected or appointed. Let me clarify that. From participating in a sunshine meeting, we're good. Any other board members have any questions on this particular item? And you, Dr. Bendros Mendengal, I'll come back to you, Mr. Vice Chair. It's your item.
I do not have a question. I have a statement. Well, I do have a question, Mr. Chair. The attorney that was present on that day, I think he was just noted that he could have stopped it. Whatever it was, I'd like to know, Mr. Chair, if the attorney, through the chair, if the attorney feels that way and would respond to that, you could have stopped it. Whatever you feel, Mr. Attorney, I want it known publicly that this is what you saw, you heard, or you felt. I need to know that through the chair.
through the chair, Mr. Garcia is here.
Good afternoon, through the chair. This is a board member conference that took place a few weeks ago, last month actually. The board policy allows you to have those board member conferences. The board policy, actually the rule was first promulgated in 2003. It was just to facilitate discussions amongst board members. It was never intended to prohibit any board member to attend. As a matter of fact, it was just to allow any board member to set up a meeting on a topic that they felt that the board was not discussing, and that they just wanted to bring it up, unlike a special board meeting that is called by a full majority of the board or by the chair or the superintendent. So it's a separate conference. It's very informal. It's not an official board meeting,
Right.
but it is covered by the Sunshine Law. And the Sunshine Law provides that once you have notice, you have public access, and you also have minutes taken at the meeting, it's a Sunshine meeting. So anybody can attend. Since it's a district and school board meeting, it has been the practice of this district, of this school board, for over 17 years to allow anybody to attend to these meetings. Now, in this particular meeting, the notice did not say that only certain board members were to attend. It actually was a notice generally for the school board. So that notice in itself did not prevent anybody from attending. When I noticed that Dr. Benders-Mendengal was not participating, I did interject into the meeting that she should be allowed to attend and to participate, not just attend, but also participate, because none of our policies or our board rules or any state statute prohibited her from attending. And she did participate for most of the meeting in both discussions, both on the topic of minority representation and on the topic of, I believe it was the shortening of the length of the meetings or any possible options to do that. So there was full participation in the meeting, and as is allowed by the Sunshine Law. And it was not violated for the Sunshine Law because the notice was appropriate for what was going on. And that's basically all that happened. I think that there was a misunderstanding as to what our practice and our policy is from this policy that was actually originally put in 2003, and then it was slightly amended in 2011 when it became a board policy. And it's only been used sparingly, by the way. It's only been used about 3 or 4 times since that time.
Follow up, Mr. Chair?
Dr. Benders-Mendengal, yes.
Thank you. When you walk into a room, regardless of your color or your race, and you're told you were not invited, you can't be here. So I'm looking for more information that maybe I hadn't read, and I am a reader. I'm a reading specialist. So that's why I left to go to see what was available that someone else had seen that I hadn't seen. Because I was in Tallahassee 8 years, and as Dr. Gallen said, I know about Sunshine. I didn't have to go to Tallahassee to know. But I'm just concerned that we're having this now, and I'm not through. There will be more discussions tomorrow night, and there will be discussions, as we know, at the board meeting. This is a very important item, should be to everyone. Should be to everyone. And I'm not going to say what Dr. Gallen said about the item. When that time comes, I will, which will be today, I will make it known that no, I was not pleased. No. And that has nothing to do with my skin tone or the African in America that I seem to have. Some people might have a problem with it, but I don't do race baiting. And why don't I do race baiting? How dare I? But I am aware of feelings. I'm not concerned about that too much because I've lived long enough to know that what I see and what I hear is true. So right now I will continue when the time comes to vote on the item, but I will also be aware of more conversation at the school board meeting next week. I have to speak truth to power. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Board Member Alonzo.
So I'm not going to take too much time because we need to be focusing on our students and our children, which is the priority of this board. But a lot of people ask me, do you enjoy being a school board member? And I tell them I do. But a couple of weeks ago and throughout this conversation, I'm disappointed. It's not what I want to do. It's not what I want to be associated with. And I'll tell you, I was very saddened when I saw my picture on a Miami Herald article that was trying to divide us, not unite us. I was disappointed when I saw us on Channel 10, where they were trying to divide us, not unite us, because I can tell you this board is united, and I'll tell the community, this board is united. I sit next to, and I'm going to call her by her first name because I call her that way, Dorothy, every meeting, and I respect her for her hard work and her dedication to this district, not just as a school board member, but as a principal and a teacher and a reading coach. And I respect Mr. Espino and coming in here and putting his time together. You know, he could be out making money as an attorney, but he's sitting here, as we all are. So I think at the end of the day, it's a sad day when things like this happen, because it divides us rather than unites us. And we need to be united in order to really do what our job is, which is to bring educational excellence to the students of Miami-Dade County. It was disappointing in the confusion from our legal team, and I know this doesn't happen. It's not a frequent meeting that occurs. And, you know, nothing against Mr. Harvey. I meet with him all the time. He's always great, and Lewis as well, Mr. Garcia. But that day there was a lot of confusion, and I was there, and that's why I want to talk about it, because the minute the confusion started and Dorothy walked out, I followed her to her office. And I said, Dorothy, come back in. Let's talk about this. Let's figure out what's going on here, because this is an issue of confusion, not an issue of excluding anybody, and what the law is and what the law allows for to and not to. So I support this item in creating further transparency as to how these meetings are supposed to be held. I think these meetings are beneficial. They work here locally because the local government is governed under Sunshine Law. Tallahassee is not governed under Sunshine Law.
No, it isn't.
Those individuals go and they sit down and they talk about everything. So when you come to bring up an item, it's already been hashed out. We govern differently here. And I like the way we govern because it's in the sunshine. Everybody has access to everything we talk about. So I support this item. I hope we can move on as a united board, which is what we need to really be focusing on. And let's focus on our children. And let's make it more happy days. I really enjoy it when I'm out there in the schools and doing things that are important. So thank you so much for this item. I look forward to supporting it and moving forward as a united board.
Thank you, Board Member Alonso. We need you to keep smiling now. So we go get the happy days are here. This is part of the process. Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And before I say my comments that I feel need to be addressed, I want to let everyone know from day one, get-go, with this board and in the past 7 years that I've been on this privileged and honored to serve on a board like the one we have now and the one we've had for the past 7 years. We have worked harmoniously. We can agree to disagree. That's human nature. We are not going to agree on everything. You don't agree on everything in your homes with your own family, but we can do so respectfully. As long as we can respectfully agree to disagree, then this is part of democracy, the wonderful democracy that we happen to enjoy in this country that so many in other countries would love to enjoy and cannot. To Board Member Alonso's point, absolutely. We are unique. We are totally different than everyone else because we do God's work on earth here. We serve children. Those innocent children that count on us. We are their role models. They watch us. They see what we do. They see how we behave. They see the example that we put out every time we meet, at any point in time. So I always say, harmoniously, I know this board is outstanding. Each and every one of you, individually and professionally, have so much to offer. But sometimes there are going to be conversations and there are going to be situations that are very difficult. And they have to occur, period. And that's what's happening here today. And ultimately, at the end, I hope that as we clarify scenarios and situations that have been unfortunate, because in my opinion, they have been unfortunate. This was unfortunate, in my opinion. At the end of the day, more that unites us instead of divides us will prevail. I do have to say that The Sunshine Law is the first thing I learned about when I stepped on here. Why? Because I was in the Office of Professional Standards. For many years, I sat on that side and watched the members on this board. And if there's one thing that is imperative is maintaining that Sunshine Law and not violating it. Because as it was stated earlier, in Tallahassee, that's okay. They can do that. We cannot. We cannot. So in all the years that I have been, again, on the district, on both sides, there and here, as an administrator, I don't ever recall ever anyone not complying with the Sunshine Law. Any previous board member, I don't ever recall that. And if it happened, I certainly don't know about it. I was concerned, and there were certain things that I have to address. And that was the last sentence in the agenda item on the front page. It states, quote, "These sunshine meetings are customary practices, a practice between local municipal council members and county commissioners. However, a review of prior school board meetings revealed that in the sunshine meetings are surprisingly not common occurrences, despite the existence of a policy that specifically formalizes this type of meeting." Again, the beauty of our democracy here is that every governmental agency decides how to conduct their meetings in the sunshine. And so based on statutes and their own policies which guide them, they do what they do in the county. They do what they do in the city of Miami, in the city of Coral Gables, and in Tallahassee, and let's see, Washington. We are not the city. We are not the county. We are not in Tallahassee. We're here in Miami-Dade County Public Schools. We serve children. We serve teachers. We serve our administrators and all of our constituents who depend on us to be their advocates, their voices, so that at the end of the day, we can give our students the world. We can prepare them to be the future leaders of tomorrow. I have the utmost respect for every elected official that I have ever worked with. Not only with the county commissioners, again, not only with the county mayors, which I have a wonderful rapport with, elected officials from all the different cities in my personal district. Everybody runs their meetings in whatever manner they feel is the best. Out of mutual respect for all that are here today, I can state that as a school board member, I can sincerely state that this board has complied with all sunshine regulations and that we have worked tirelessly to serve our children. But let's not forget again that we are bound by different state statutes and regulations as well that we have to abide by. So it is my understanding that when two or more board members meet for any reason, at any time, to talk about topics that are going to be addressed at our board meetings and that we have to vote on, those meetings need to be publicly advertised. There's no real time limit. I've read about that already, but 7 days is what's recommended, because it's actually not even in writing from what I understand. Is that right, Mr. General Counsel, by the way?
Yes, generally that's correct, but there are some instances in the policy that mention 7 days, but generally, no, it does not.
Have to be, right. But that is what is recommended from experts. So we have a number of opportunities offered for board members, and this is where I had the concern, for board members to address issues. There are 4 committee meetings. We're having them today. In every one of our committee meetings, there is a section for new business. That's why in the past, I don't know, 15, 20 years, I don't recall any board member conferences. I know when they started, I know that was a certain board member who initiated it for a certain purpose, but it hasn't been done for a very, very, very long time. Why? Because we have this. This is an open sunshine meeting where any one of us has the opportunity to bring forth any issue that is of concern without having to have an additional meeting to attend. We also have our board meetings. And at the board meeting, I always ask before we conclude, is there any new business? Anyone can address new business at that particular time as well. And so board member conferences, which appear to be restricted to board members that were invited, was a major issue of concern for me particularly. Why? And I do concur with my colleague Dr. Gallen on this statement. We are duly elected or appointed, not only officials, but we are constitutional officers. We can go to any meeting, and that has been the guidance I have received, and I will check with General Counsel again. Anytime. And if we need to speak, we can also speak. ABAC. I was a representative for ABAC for years. But other board members could come, and if they chose to speak, they were able to speak, and they did not have to be invited. Anyone can attend those meetings. And like ABAC, many other committees that we have as well. So I did have a concern with board and a duly elected board member, constitutional officer, not being allowed to participate in a meeting. And I did ask General Counsel about that because I wanted to make sure that I was interpreting this correctly. Mr. General Counsel, sir, is any one of these 9 board members that are in front of you, any one of us, precluded from attending any meeting that has been properly sunshined?
Yes, through the chair, they are not precluded.
Okay. And that was my concern from the initial meeting, that there was a meeting with just a specific number of board members. At that point, it was just one additional board member. I had never seen that happen in our school district, although it's legal. It is part of policy. We have it in policy. And I want that very clearly articulated. There was no policy issues that were broken here. My concern was the fact that any board member on this dais to be told they could not participate was a concern for me. And I brought it again to our legal counsel, our general counsel, because I am not an attorney. And I am guided by our attorney who has done a wonderful job here for many, many years, guiding us. And that was the response he gave. So I think that that may have been part of the situation, which unfortunately evolved because there was a misunderstanding maybe of what we have perceived for years as part of what our duties and responsibilities here are as board members, and the ability to be able to participate in any meeting at any time. And that's why I wanted to have full clarity on this, and that's why I asked our parliamentarian, our general counsel, to respond to this particular, because I think that this was the genesis of the entire unfortunate situation, which unraveled a couple of weeks ago. So as we move forward, again, I say, as a chair of this board, I am very proud to serve with professionals such as yourselves, each one of you bringing to the table so many wonderful perspectives that will be a win-win for our children at the end of the day. And I will work tirelessly during my term to bring us all together. But knowing, again, this is not utopia. It's not a perfect world. And there will be opportunities for us to work very cohesively together. And we do on the majority of the issues that come before us. But there will be times where we may have differences of opinion. And as long as we can respectfully agree to disagree with each other, it's okay. It's called democracy. So I thank you for bringing the item. And I look forward to further conversation as we proceed.
Mr. Vice Chair, your item.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you as always for your leadership and for your clarifications on the item. I mean, so I agree. Just because a tool was on the shelf and hadn't been used in a long time, which these board conferences were, doesn't make their use incorrect. And the whole purpose of it was absolutely to follow the Sunshine Law to the greatest extent possible. Because the reality is we have deal with a lot of issues. And as Board Member Alonso said, bringing things completely baked like they do in Tallahassee is not something that we do here. The one thing I will say is that insofar as the ability that these meetings, and Board Member Gallon's always telling me, he knows how I like these meetings to be efficient. The purpose of a board conference, one of the purposes of the board conference is to bring an item that's very, very, very early on its infancy. As a matter of fact, I was talking to Mr. Frazier and I said, I was on a fact-finding mission. That's what I was doing, a fact-finding mission to understand all the elements of it, starting with, obviously, with the Board Member Alonso, so I didn't step on his toes from a policy. I was trying to be differential. And so the idea that we have the ability to have those fact-finding missions as part of our legislative, our policy process, I thought is imperative, and certainly letting the public know that we're doing it in the most transparent manner, maybe even to a standard that's higher than the Sunshine Law, is the intent of this item. And the only thing is, one final thing on Board Member Gallon's comments is we all have our experiences, and I defer to your administrative experience, I defer yours, I defer to Board Member Colucci's teaching experience, and so on and so forth. Every member of this board brings their bearings. Our job is to be oversight. And so it's perfectly legitimate for you to disagree with a member of our administration saying, I've got my own experience and I understand, I give you your opinion, administrator, do wait, but I'm gonna go this way. And so insofar as the role that my legal experience has is that I certainly can agree with our general counsel's office, but I also reserve the right to disagree and decide to move forward on what I believe the legal backing for this item is. And that's what I've done. And I think it's, I don't know any two attorneys you put in a room that are going to agree. As a matter of fact, the number one answer you get from an attorney is, it depends. It depends. So that's how we make it. So, that's what you're getting from me, robust pushback on conversations of great importance to us. And I appreciate the board's consideration on the item.
I want to thank all of our colleagues.
Chair.
Oh, Board Member Santos, I'm sorry.
Thank you so much. I have a procedural clarification question for the General Counsel. The action recommend here recommends initiating some rulemaking procedures, although it outlines specific language in the body. So will this item, if it passes, then initiate an initial reading for any policy changes?
Through the chair, that's correct.
Thank you, General Counsel. So the only thing I'll add is that I'm glad we're seeing language to clarify, so there's a very clear understanding on all fronts about what's allowed and what's not. And what I heard was the ability to have a fact-finding mission should not preclude anyone from participating actively, any board member from participating actively. I know that was a direct question that was asked at the beginning. There was a clear no on that's not my intent. And I now knowing that there will be an initial reading to ensure that the language very clearly outlines that, I am happy to support the item.
Thank you. You good? Okay. Thank you, Board Member Santos, and I think that assuaged any ambiguity around past impact, present discourse, and future plans. And I think the Vice Chair was very clear in that response. And as we go through the rulemaking process, I'm sure that our attorneys will make sure that, notwithstanding the direct response to that question, that the rulemaking process will comport to law. And I think we've had general consensus of what the law stipulates. The implementation or the articulation or the decision-making at one moment in time does not abdicate our obligation to follow the law. So it is my expectation with this item, and I'll be bringing a similar item that drills down, and I don't think they're a conflict. I think they're parallel. I think we're stronger together. That will be provided much more additional specificity around this. So I'm sure that what comes back for rulemaking will be in compliance with the law. And I think the Vice Chair has indicated that. My last comment as we prepare to vote on this item is, I have to say for the record, once again, speaking of the law, my messaging, as I invited anybody to see, was what occurred that day was in full compliance with the law. I said that with the law as it relates to the notice, as it relates to the public access. What was in conflict has been addressed, and I think we have much clarity around that. So as Board Member Alonso said, we can move forward as a board, but any individual board members, including yourself, as you've been very clear, that may have felt impugned, reserve the right to address that accordingly. And so I just want to make sure that our actions as a board collectively reflect what's compliant with the law, and that as we move forward individually, as our chair said, we govern ourselves as individuals outside of our titles. I'm just going to say that, outside of our titles. Call me Rain Man, call me dog catcher, but respect me. I don't care what, I don't believe in titular leadership. Wrote about that 25 years ago. And I think that speaks to who we are, Board Member Colucci, and you mentioned relative to how we love and how we care and how we honor an entity that's greater than ourselves. And that manifests in how we treat each other, because it does say is what you do to the least of us. And I'll leave it at that. So I'm ready to vote on the item for co-sponsors. Co-sponsors on the item? Okay. All in favor?
All right.
Okay. Vote on motion on the item.
Move it.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you. One note.
That is cap. 5-hour flights, couple nights at the flat. To be real, couldn't see me making moves while I'm at. I'm still